I've been on a low, I've been taking my time. I feel like I'm out of my mind. It feel like my life ain't mine. I've been on the low, I've been taking my time. I feel like I'm out of my mind.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Project Mayday. These are your hosts G and Bree, and today we have Chris Orrey. Chris Orrey is a retired lieutenant from Hayward PD, and she's been in the business for 30 years, and we'll hear from when she started off as a explorer all the way to her retirement. She's got an incredible story going to Colorado, coming back. I mean, this woman is absolutely powerful when she speaks. Chris, welcome.
Thank you very much. That was a great intro. I appreciate it.
Okay, so how did you start, or how were you even interested in going law enforcement?
I love this story. So my mom tells everyone I wanted to be a cop for as long as she can remember, since I was a little kid. And I think it's because when I was in second grade, I won second place in a bicycle rodeo. And the CHP had hosted the rodeo. This is down in El Cajon near San Diego. And they came to our classrooms to give us our little prizes. So, imagine second grade, you're sitting there and you hear this knock at the door and everybody gets all excited because that doesn't happen very often. And the door opens and these two CHP officers walk in and they're so tall, right? They must have been 8 foot tall. And they have my little plastic trophy to give to me for winning second place in the bicycle rodeo, but one of them was a woman. And I didn't think anything about it for years. I just knew I wanted to be a cop, and I knew I could be a cop. And it really wasn't until I became a cop that I got the message women shouldn't be cops, just because that seed had been planted. I think it speaks to the importance of role models. Like, I saw that female cop, and this was in the early 70s. So there was probably only a half dozen female cops in the entire state at the time. And I just got lucky and happened to have had this encounter with one of them. And I sure wish I knew who she was.
That's pretty incredible.
Well, I mean, your grandpa, when he was on the episode, he was talking about how he was in charge.
Yeah, he was in charge of recruiting and training the first females to get hired with CHP. Yeah.
So your grandpa was directly responsible for me being a cop.
I will have to tell him that.
That's
I'm sure
awesome.
That will make him very happy.
That's cool. That's really cool.
So, that encounter happened, and then, you started hearing dialogue about women shouldn't be, police officers. So where did you actually put your foot down and draw a line in the sand? Like, this is what I'm going to do.
Always. Even though I knew some people didn't think I should do it, there were enough people that believed in me and thought that I should. And I had a rocky road through my career, and I definitely had challenges. I was part of a lawsuit, where we sued for gender discrimination and harassment. But it was the men who did support us, the men who did support me, and the women. I had amazing trailblazers in front of me, that even though there were detractors, I never doubted that I could do the job.
Mm-hmm. And, going into that, what was kind of that, just speak on it as you may, that lawsuit about? Like, in a little bit more, in detail.
Yeah, so honestly, that was one of the toughest things I've ever done professionally. It was, I was raised by the Hayward Police Department. I started there as an explorer. I grew up in Hayward, and I grew up in that police department. And I would not have joined that lawsuit if I didn't think there was another alternative. But we weren't being listened to. And when it came to the point where I was being harassed so heavily by my boss that I was afraid of losing my job, I felt like I didn't have a choice. And, like I said, as many men as there were that were supportive, there were a few men in power that were making life really difficult for women. And we felt like this was an opportunity to change the department. Unfortunately, I found out that it's more complicated than that. A lawsuit doesn't change a police department.
Absolutely. As we can tell in this day.
Job.
Yeah. In this day, we can tell that a lawsuit, just one, a couple lawsuits don't change a department. It's, you have to change the structure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, and it's about the people, and the people have to change, and I've done a lot of work around implicit bias and, dealing with issues of racial diversity and any kind of cultural biases or anything like that. And the bottom line is we have to hire people that already embrace difference. And that's the important thing.
Yeah. And so how was it specifically being on your probation with Hayward? I know, East Bay, it's very old school. And what was probation like?
Well, the police department is a little bit different than fire departments in that our key training is in field training, the police academy and field training. And I definitely had some challenges, but honestly, it wasn't as hard as it could have been. More of my challenges came later, I think, when I started competing for promotions and stuff like that. I think in the beginning, I was just seen as a hardworking cop, and my beat partners appreciated me because I was always willing to take more than my share of the load. And the problems I had early on in training, honestly, were more about issues of racism. And I'm white, so it was more about, observing them and struggling with, what do we talk about, and the whole, code of silence and stuff like that. Those kind of complications happened throughout my career, but training wasn't bad. I had really good training officers.
Yeah, and you and I have spoke offline, and I was asking you about the Oscar situation in at Fruitville Station, and and you were actually on a team. I mean, you can talk more about it, but you were on the team that investigated it. Talk about that.
I was the commander of our Criminal Investigations Bureau at the time, and BART's investigators reached out to us for some expertise, so we loaned them a long time OIS, officer involved shooting / homicide detective to provide them some insight on the investigation. But I knew from the get-go, just based on what little got leaked in the press, that it was a bad situation. That, it was just bad all the way around.
Yeah, and for the people listening that don't know about the situation, can you describe it a little bit?
Well, there was a lot of chaos on a BART platform. There had been a fight, a lot of different suspects involved. Police couldn't kind of figure out who was involved and who wasn't. They were trying to take control of a very chaotic situation. They had people proned out, and Officer Meserly pulled his handgun and shot Oscar Grant in the back and killed him. I'm a certified force analyst, so I was pretty certain from the get-go, and this was his defense in court, that it was a mistaken a weapon confusion issue, that he thought he had drawn his taser, but he had drawn his gun. Hayward always did a cross draw with our tasers.
And what does that mean? What does that mean, people listening?
Having to reach across the body to get the taser versus your sidearm is on your strong side to prevent that kind of weapon confusion. BART had their taser right below their handgun. And it's tragic all the way around. It shouldn't have happened. He went to prison, and Oscar Grant lost his life, and his daughter and his family lost him. And there's plenty of responsibility at different steps to pass around. Where you coulda, woulda, shoulda, done things differently, but it was a tragedy all the way around.
With all of the hats that police officers are supposed to wear, right? They're supposed to be the social worker. They're supposed to advocate child protective services, all of the hats, the coroner, everything. How do you think that they can actually manage this and have a long career like you've had 30 years? Because what we're seeing is longevity is not really there right now. And especially with so many policy changes, there's a lot of fear of being a police officer and being able to retire out as a police officer. A lot of people, especially right now in Sacramento, they're having a hard time retaining and recruiting. So what's your take on that? Is that a mental wellness issue?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's a tough time to be a cop. There is no doubt about it. My best friend is still, a working cop, and we talk about this all the time. It's just really, really hard. I think police departments have to hire people that are already really healthy mentally, people that have multiple interests, people that have a lot of family support, people that have already been through adversity and come out the other side. There's a whole mindset around being able to deal with adversity at work, shake it off, go home and have a life outside of the job. And, you know, I think that was one of the keys for me, having just a shit ton of support and having other interests beyond the police department.
No. And, you know, speaking of adversity and going through adversity, you are definitely the hallmark of that, as far as being in a relationship and then being a cop, and then your relationship, you know, having a mental health aspect to it, and the deteriorating in mental health aspect to it. So can you speak about that a little bit when you were at Hayward and you were dating Kathy?
Yeah, so I was a young cop. And I was in a relationship with a police officer that was very challenged. And instead of, you know, being mature and ending that relationship, I you know, kept moving forward with it. And then I ended up creating a friendship, a really deep friendship with a paramedic who worked in my beat. And we went to calls all the time, you know, in the middle of the night, and talked, and, you know, just really got deep, you know, 3 a.m, and you're dealing with life and death. And I saw her save lives, and she saw me handle shooting scenes, and we really connected, and unwittingly fell in love. And obviously it was very complex because, you know, she had been with somebody, I was with somebody, and I didn't handle it well. You know, I went back and forth. I was very indecisive about what I should do. And ultimately, you know, Kathy, I think, was already dealing with depression, and had mentioned suicide, but had promised me she would never take that route. And, you know, when I chose to stay with my previous partner because she was pregnant and having a baby, I think it was just kind of the final straw for Kathy. And 4 days after the baby was born, she took her life. And she had pictures of us on the seat of her car next door when it happened. So, you know, it was very clear to me where she was at, you know, when she took her life. And it was the worst thing imaginable for me. I could not get past the guilt. And, you know, became very suicidal myself, just because I was so deeply guilt-ridden for the loss of the relationship and for the loss of this really amazing woman. Because she was just the most amazing paramedic I'd ever been around. She cared about people. She was good at her job. You know, she saved lives. She was just an amazing soul, and probably just a little too sensitive for this world. And it took me a long time to get over that. And it was so hard to be in Hayward. Every time I saw an ambulance or went to a suicidal person call, or, you know, it was just constant reminder. And I became so deeply depressed myself. I knew I had to do something, and I knew I didn't want to take my own life, even though that was the most obvious solution to me, to just join her and let go of the pain. But I didn't want anybody else to feel the way I was feeling. So I left Hayward, the department that I loved, and I went to Aurora, Colorado. I figured time in the mountains and a change of scenery, you know, would be huge. And I made a deal with myself that if a year passed and I still felt that bad, then I would go ahead and join her. Wow. And I still remember the day in Colorado. I went to Echo Lake with my dog, and I looked out over the lake, and it was a year later, and I just said, okay, you know, this is my decision. I can't join her. I got to figure out a way to move on. You know, and I did. And then shortly after that, Colorado and Aurora was a great department. They treated me great. And then Amendment 2 passed, which was a statewide anti-gay amendment saying that you could discriminate against somebody for being gay. And my renters in my house here in the Bay Area ended up leaving. So all of a sudden I was carrying a rent and a mortgage, and it like the universe was telling me it was time to go back home. And Hayward welcomed me back with open arms, and it was just enough time away to heal. And you know, it still stayed with me. It's still with me. It always will be, you know, and she will always be with me. But you know, again, it was having the support of friends and coworkers and family who, you know, got me through it. And, you know, I think that's just the key to everything, is to have a really important support system. And I dove into therapy. That was huge.
I was just going to ask, I'm like, what did you do? You know, if you were at that point where you gave your you basically gave yourself a timeline for life, right? 1 year. What did you do to get healthier?
Therapy, time, a lot of crying, a lot of, it was a whole process of forgiving myself and finding my value through the muck of the grief, and the blame, the self-blame. And ultimately I had to learn that I really screwed up and I made a lot of mistakes, and there's a lot of things I would have liked to have done differently, and it was ultimately her decision, and it went deeper than the circumstances.
Yeah. And when I talk to other guys and gals in our services about, moving on from the past, they always say, yeah, you got to forget the past, you got to move on. But it's like, no, you don't have to. You can definitely visit it, but you got to create a new narrative around it. And I think I think you've definitely done that. What was it? Therapy specifically? What do you think was your kind of turning point into creating that new narrative around her?
Well, I think going to Colorado and making a new group of friends that weren't connected to her, and feeling so much love and support there while still having the love and support back home. So I was just in an environment that just rarely reminded me of her. So I was really able to heal. And also having mutual friends who knew and loved us both forgive me. I can't underestimate that either, because I was like, if they can forgive me, I can forgive me.
No.
Yeah, the ripple effect of suicide is so painful and goes so wide. I mean, as a lot of you know, my own father committed suicide, and that ripple effect, I mean, it goes far beyond of ending the pain, because it creates so much more pain for just everyone. So the fact that you took your own life in your hands and said, this is what I'm going to do. I am going to heal, right? Even though you gave yourself a timeline. But the point is, you're like, I am going to give myself time. I'm not going to make that decision. I'm going to pause. I'm going to change everything. And I'm going to, like we just said, we're going to recreate the narrative around this incident. And we're seeing, obviously, so if we're killing ourselves faster than the job's killing us, obviously something's wrong. And so absolutely. You hear about these incidents of suicides, whether it's someone you worked with, whether it's someone that you were in a relationship with, everyone around that incident is deeply affected.
Yeah.
And did you see that as far as your own family goes?
Yeah, I mean, my family was desperately worried about me. And my mom loved Kathy, and she had her own grief around it. So the ripples are, just tremendous. And Kathy's brother is in the fire service, and it goes on and on and on. Everybody who knew and loved Kathy, has a part of us to this day that hurts and misses her. And that doesn't change.
No.
And I was a crisis negotiator for almost 20 years, and I started the peer support program, at Hayward PD, just to the critical incident stress management program to prevent those kind of things from happening. It's just anything we can do. You mentioned pausing. Anything we can get people to do to just hit that pause button and grasp onto something, because many people have been suicidal and get through it. Many people have attempted suicide and not been successful, and glad that they weren't successful. We hear that all the time. And so what you're doing with Project Mayday, so important, so critical, because if one person watches one of your videos and it helps them, then it's worth it.
That's right.
Well, and you're one of those videos. So give yourself that credit. So now let's shift gears, and you coming back. You're back into your environment where you just left, not just left, but a year ago you left. What was that transition when you came back and you started implementing? You started seeing those ambulances again that Kathy worked in. Like what was that feeling?
It was hard, and I just had to be resilient, and I just had to get through it and focus on the good as it came. And I don't want to sound cocky, but I was a good cop. And so I knew that I could make a difference and that I could take Kathy's death and turn it into a positive, because it definitely made me a better negotiator, a better crisis negotiator, and it made me a better police officer. It made me more compassionate. It just, I had to turn it into a positive.
Mm-hmm.
So why do you think other cops or, firefighters, military, EMS, why don't they go that deep that you went as far as, looking at yourself, recreating the narrative? Why don't they go as far, you think? What advice would you give them to encourage them to go that far?
Well, I think we all, have different journeys, whether, it's our own human development or personal growth or experiences. And some people just have the experiences to give them that resilience, and some people don't, and you could go into the whole psychology around it. Some people are very pro-social, where bad things happen and they respond more positively. Like maybe a kid who grew up with abusive parents would grow up to decide they'll never be that way with their kids, versus an antisocial person may grow up with that and become a batterer, and I'm not saying cops and firefighters and medics are pro-social or antisocial, but we bring a whole background and experiences to, what we do. Sorry, the last part there. It's just complex. It's really complex. And it goes back again to hiring people who have a lot of life experience. I'm a big advocate of not hiring cops until they turn 25, because our brains are still developing.
I was just going to ask you that. I'm like, yeah, because, 21, I was thinking back when I was 21, and you give, you hand someone a gun and say, hey, now this is your responsibility. And I'm like, 21, how much life have you really lived? Right? 25, you have a little bit of life experience there, you have something to fall back on. So, that is something that's a good recommendation.
And physiologically, our brains are still developing until we're 25.
Well, I know that's true for men, so.
So, Chris, fast forward into what you're doing now. Retired as a lieutenant and all the other accolades that you've obtained in those 30 years. I know you're trying to get you are getting your master's in the works of it. How is that? What's that process like? Finally reaching the end and then recreating yourself again to this powerful woman that we know today.
Oh, you're so sweet. Well, I do have to say I wasn't ready to retire. It wasn't my choice. Even though I have a service retirement because I had put in 30 years, I wasn't ready to retire, and my body kind of forced it on me. I couldn't physically wear the vest anymore because of spinal injuries that I had. And that was hard. I actually had stress dreams or nightmares about the police department for years after I retired. It was a really hard process. And I think I had a lot of distractions. I had a new grandson and a new love. I fell in love with a fire lieutenant, and who you both know, and I had a lot of distractions, but subconsciously I had a lot to process. It was a hard exit from a police department and a community that I really passionately loved. Like I said, they raised me. So I think the most important thing was I did other things. Like you said, I recreated my life. So I'm in grad school now, and I'm majoring in comparative religion and philosophy. It's like so far away from police work, I think. But then it's constantly, I've written papers about police work in my, grad school program. So I guess nothing's that far apart. But, it's really about following new passions and following new curiosities. And, I've seen people, I have a close friend whose husband took his own life after he retired. And he didn't have a life. He was so bored that he went to work at a Costco, and he just was unhappy. His whole identity was wrapped up in being a police officer. And, we can't be that way. We have to have a plan. We have to create passions outside of our profession. I had a sergeant tell me once, and I've always hung on to this, is that we have to work to live, not live to work. And so that's what I've done. I've just done all kinds of things. My fiance calls it the spaghetti method. I just throw spaghetti on the wall and see what sticks. So I've tried all kinds of different things since I retired.
No, for sure. So you are getting married here soon. What are you looking forward to? In I know you guys are living together and all that good stuff, and so basically together you guys went on a hiking trip in Yosemite, and all that. But like, what are you really looking forward to?
Well, traveling. I'm following my curiosity with my degree to see where it takes me, because I have no idea where it's going to take me. I don't know if I'm going to teach or write or what. And just really enjoying our people. I because of our careers, we have this heightened awareness of death. And I think that can really be morose and bring us down, or it can give us a real joy and sanctity of life and a real appreciation. Like, I don't know when I'm going to go. I don't know when my ticket's up. So I'm going to make my life amazing right now. And I'm going to tell my people I love them right now, so that if I'm gone tomorrow, they know. And I've lived my life as fully as I can. And, that's how retirement's going to look.
It's looking that way already.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. However, before we're going to get into some rapid fire.
Say that to a police officer.
Rapid fire. Cynthia did great. However,
Of course you did.
I think Chris might beat her in some answers here.
I'm very competitive. So.
Well, we have some very interesting rapid fire questions for you.
So the rule is one word or one phrase. That's all you can answer in. All right?
One word or one phrase.
One word or one phrase.
No story.
No stories. However, I get into a story after you answer.
You have to reel them in.
It's a situation. All right. So one word or one phrase. Bree, take it away.
Okay. Simple. Number 1. Is a hot dog considered a sandwich? Yes or no?
Yes.
All right. That is a debate. Number 2. Would you rather fight 100 duck-sized horses, or one horse-sized duck? I'll repeat it.
Definitely 100 duck-sized horses.
When she thought of that question, I was like, what is this?
No, Zeph thought of that question, by the way, Zeph.
I was like,
He's
I have
behind
a
the scenes.
story about that answer. But I won't get
we'll put a pause in it. Go ahead.
What?
Yeah, what was you got
When
to...
I was a kid, I went to Clear Lake for all my summers, and this duck had a hook in its mouth, so we caught it to take the hook out, and it sat all over us. So just picture horse-sized duck.
That was worth pausing.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Next question. What is your best feature?
My heart.
Okay. All right. Next question. If you had to be a Disney character, which one would you choose? Oh, no.
Carl from the movie Up.
Okay. Yeah. I can see that.
All right. Last. What is one word to describe law enforcement?
Amazing.
Absolutely. Chris.
You are amazing.
Absolutely. You are amazing. You are what makes law enforcement amazing. We've been trying to do this for the longest time, and finally we are here. I can't speak enough about you. You are absolutely someone that I look up to, and someone that really gives and exudes a personality that I want to imitate. Like, absolutely an amazing woman, powerful woman, and a leader. And I would follow you anywhere. I know Bree absolutely would as well. So again, thank you so much for coming on, and we really appreciate you.
Thank you both for all you're doing, and thank you, Project Mayday. I really admire you both, and if I can ever support you in any way, please reach out.
Absolutely. All right, guys, this is Project Mayday. Call out.
Call out.